that sort of thing. So we can talk about that kind of conceptually and then jump into, now I've got my data, what do I do with it?
What do you think? What do you think the typical? What's the typical instructor who doesn't know anything about data? What kind of stuff do you hear? Well, when people approach you, what's on the other end of the phone, or what's in the paddock? What's in their eyes? What's in their voice? What do you hear?
I hear a lot of when, particularly if I'm at the track and someone's asking me questions about our product and explaining it, and they're saying, "Oh, that would be great to use with my student." Primarily because it's easy to move. I can take my Apex Pro on a suction mount and stick it in a student's car. But usually, when I'm listening as a coach, particularly I'm trying to listen to, I hear the words that this person's saying, but what are they really telling me? And a lot of times I'm uncomfortable with data because no one's ever taught me data, because there's not a way to learn data. Eric and I both have the benefit of having raced professionally, where if you're not using data, then you're not at the front. It's as simple as that. I've got a data system in the car to run the car, essentially. In many cases, it's tethered to the ECU. I've got to have it anyway.
Required, yeah, required by the rule set.
Yeah, required. You got to hand your data card over to the series so they can check compliance and make sure you're not running a super cheaty Eric Meyer rotary motor. 46 million horsepower.
Something's happened with our connection here. It's getting unstable.
So that's when I hear people ask me about data, it's, hey, where do I get started? Where do I get started? And that's when I point people towards various YouTube videos, Eric's Instructor Summit channel, my Apex Pro channel that we maintain, that just has some basics, of watching someone like Eric or myself manipulate the data software to explain what they're seeing. Because if you look at it, it looks like gibberish until you spend enough time with it. So the first,
what do you say? Want to have some fun?
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, while Mr. Rains is pulling that up, we're going to talk about a couple things that are, with a little bit of investment and time and effort, you're going to go, hey, I understand that. And that's what the goal is. The goal is not to make you brilliant. It's just to expose the easy, simple parts of this, where several of new folks who are watching this are probably going to go, what? Really? That easy? That's exactly where we're coming from.
Yeah, give me just a second here, Eric.
Sure, I'll talk about shooting clays with John Poppenhaus and maybe what Kevin's temperature was in his place. Hey, why isn't anybody chatting? You betcha. Well, Corf, Mr. Rains is pulling up some one of our first slide efforts, and here we go right now.
You want to look at my data from like an hour and a half, 2 hours ago?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start here. Eric, this is the first time anybody that's using Apex Pro has seen this home screen interface, so I won't be focused on this.
This is because that's a new product coming out, and we're not about that, but you just happen to be using it and testing it this weekend, right?
I did. So I didn't have time to delete the app and download the App Store version, so I'm just going to use. And I actually had to delete my app and remove all my data from it because I needed to clear everything for some new stuff that we were testing this weekend. So Eric, the big thing that I want in before we even talk about the speed trace, data can be represented in a lot of different ways. And that's why we hear a lot of people talk about video and how big of a benefit video can be. And that's one form of data. Another form of data is driver feedback. When I get out of the car, the front end did this, right? I didn't feel confident in the rear end. I, felt some understeer. When I came off the brake, felt like the front end popped up off the ground, right? I would really encourage you, if you're considering jumping into a data system or getting more invested in learning data, first think about your subjective feedback and how detailed you can be when debriefing about what the car was doing, and start taking some notes, because you really need that in order for the data and everything else to be more powerful. Would you agree with that, Eric?
What do you mean by that? The stuff that people are probably already doing. Would you define that a little bit?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So whether it's a track map or a notepad or using notes, actually I can swipe over, on laps and use notes in the Apex Pro app here. Or maybe it's just notes on your iPhone. Just some of the things about the session. So this session is a great example. 3:57 p.m. We ran Hoosier R7 slicks on the car, some scrub slicks. And the biggest thing about the traffic was that about the session, I'm sorry, was that it was a mixed session. So it was advanced run group all the way to novice run group. So the first subjective input was a lot of cars would stack up on straightaways because they weren't comfortable giving point buys. So it wasn't a session where I'm going to go out and light the world on fire. And I want to make sure that I have that kind of conversation with myself. That's not what I'm looking for when I look at data from this session. Now I'm not going to see track record lap times. So that's one element. Now to go further than that, right? It's what did the car feel like? Did it do anything uncharacteristic or different than what it's done before? Was it fairly predictable? Did you have a big moment that you weren't expecting that felt like it was the car? I tend to think about the process of the corner, being initial application of the brakes, the turn in point, the middle of the corner, the apex, and the track out point, and I try to think through the balance of the car at each point. And I kind of replay some corners in my head, and then I make some notes. When I hit the brake, the weight doesn't transfer forward as fast as I like. Maybe my pad wear is low. Maybe I need to bleed the brakes, something like that. Right. As I turn the wheel, the car would really point into the corner. It would kind of rotate, it would turn very quickly, right, and eagerly. Did it do that everywhere? Left-hand corners, right-hand corners? You don't have to do this for every corner, every session, all the time. But if you kind of have a mental debrief that you go through and go, this is what the car was doing, this is what I felt, you're gathering data through the seat, through your eyes, through your hands. Document that as best as you can, as quickly as you can, or just sit there in the car and think about it before talking to someone else. Does that make sense, Eric?
Absolutely. What I just heard you say was just everybody's got to hear this real nice and up close and personal. Data doesn't have to be X's and O's and ones and zeros, right? It can be as simple as, what do you remember in that you're recording? Was it raining? Was there traffic? Did you have sticker tires? It's all important information to have.
Yeah. So the overarching example here, Eric, was we were on some scrub Hoosier R7s that I bought from somebody that are a couple years old and have heat cycles on them, and they were shaking the car like crazy. I mean, 100 miles an hour, just crazy vibration. And that's really important to document that type of information, particularly if it's safety related, particularly if it's, going to help you progress with the car, right? You don't want to be fighting something with the car that might be wrong. So you want to document that. Eric, the other thing that I was going to say from the element of what data actually is this screen we're looking at right now is a GPS overlay. So this is showing the driven line on the track overlaid with the satellite image. There's a lot of different software that will produce this. Some of the softwares that you're using that aren't Apex Pro require a little more legwork to get this to display. But in the Apex Pro app, when you tap the session, this is what you're going to see.
So I see, Mr. Rains, I see underneath the speedometer, the black sphere, the black circle, the speedometer, it says a little Google Maps, kind of a ghost image right there. Not Google, an Apple Maps, rather.
Yeah, Apple Maps right here. Exactly. So this is an Apple Maps image with the data that I choose to display with this middle channel selector here, data channel selector, displays it over the track. Now, there's a couple of things that are really important to know. Even those of you that may have a very, very high end data system with like a 20 hertz GPS or a roof mounted GPS, particularly if you're using your phone. But if you have a nice GPS, just remember that the Department of Defense and the public access to satellites only allows for about a 5 to 6 foot, basically, grace period window. So if you're plotting GPS points over a map, for security reasons, the government doesn't want you to be super precise. Does that make sense, Eric?
Yep.
So when we look at data displayed over the track, we can observe the driven line, the path we choose to take around the track. But just remember, it's not going to be inch precise. It's going to be within a car width of where you actually were in most cases. If you're using a phone only, say I use the Apex Pro app without the Apex Pro hardware, without this guy, this little unit, or I use Harry's lap timer or Track Addict with just my phone, this image is not going to look good, right? It's going to look like I drove off into the woods, or I, you know,
Can you give us an
turned-
example or show a potential example for those
I
that are
don't
brand new to this?
I don't know if I have one actually. I had to, since I had to delete my app earlier, I had to get rid of all the sample data that I had. But the best way I know how to describe it is it'll look like you turn the wheel like this, and then you straighten it, and then this, and then straighten it, and this, and then straighten it. It looks notchy. So if you're following along and you have Harry's lap timer, or you've used another, actually that's an example right there. You see that on the top right?
The top right. Show me
It,
where we're looking.
it just went away. I'm sorry. It's just because
okay.
it was buffering. But if you have Harry's lap timer or Track Addict on your phone at home, or Race Chrono or something like that, and you've only used your phone, go look at your data and view it over a GPS map, and you'll see what I mean. So Eric, there's a 1 hertz GPS in a phone, in a smartphone. So 1 hertz is a frequency measure. So that means your position is recorded once every second. Whereas when you have a GPS antenna in a device like the Apex Pro, they're going to at least have a 10 hertz GPS. That's kind of the industry standard. 10 means you're going to get 10 position and speed samples a second. So your plot over the map and your speed trace data, your G-force data, everything else is going to be way, 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 way better, and actually kind of look like something that you can use. So if you're just using your smartphone, I would urge you to look into something to enhance its power, because it's not going to be good information to look at. Does that make sense, Eric? Do we have any questions?
No, keep going. Keep going. Keep going here. Show us some of our wonderful colors of the track map.
Yeah, sure. So the point I was getting to earlier, talking about debriefing and video, is that another way to view data is over this satellite map. And if you ever hear anybody say that that's not real data or anything like that, that's a complete misnomer, right? This is data. It's just a different way to view it.
Get ready to get blown away, guys. This is so simple. It's hard. It's almost difficult. It's so simple. I love this.
So Eric, the way I like to view this map, I like to look at long G a lot on this channel. So longitudinal G-force.
So I'm brand new, Mr. Rains. What the heck is long G? I tuned in because this said it was going to be 3 easy things for instructors, and I don't know what that means. What's long G?
Long G is where your body goes in the car when you use the gas or the brake with your hands straight on the wheel. Right? Positive, backwards, negative, forwards, right?
So we're talking about the red color here for what I see is some entering some corners that would be braking
right
prior to turn in.
And that's why I like this view, because it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Red is going to represent hard braking. Yellow is going to represent basically 0 longitudinal G, right? Neutral. Green is going to represent positive acceleration. So on the gas pedal out of the corner.
So on the scale of this, if accelerating is way over on the right, that's green. Braking is way over the left, that's red. And somewhere in the transition is yellow.
That's right. Exactly.
Exactly what we're looking at here.
Yep. So if you're looking at, or you're thinking about your home track, I'm going to use Barber because that's the only data that I have right now. But if you're thinking about your home track, maybe it's Road Atlanta, maybe it's Watkins Glen, maybe it's Laguna Seca, maybe it's Brainerd. Think about a corner where you have to brake hard. This is where you want to go in and look at long G and look at the coloring of the progression of the corner, right? Because as instructors, we teach firm initial application of the brake, right? Use the brake pedal. Then we want people to release that brake pedal delicately, right? We're kind of teaching that from day one, even though the concept of trail braking, the whole idea, how much, when, where, all that is not going to be there. The finesse of the student's not going to be there. We're teaching that concept. Brake hard initially, release the pedal, right? Boxer on the pedal, ballerina off of it. That's kind of what we want to do. So on this data channel, what we're viewing, what I'm seeing here is a nice red application of the brake, meaning I'm braking hard. I've got the weight over the nose. Then as I get to the turn-in point, I can't turn in at threshold brake, right? I've got to come out of the pedal. So I see some orange color right here. I see some color change and start to turn to yellow, right? And that's what we want to see. That means that I'm braking hard, I'm coming out of the pedal, and then I'm off of it kind of at the middle part of the corner here, right? Usually right around the apex or the tightest part of the corner. So this is what I would call a good example, Eric. If you want, I don't know that I actually have a bad example of this. Could be a bad example.
I actually take back it to the go stay right there for a second. Ready? I got an idea here for all the new folks here, guys. I'm going to take some yellow right here, and I'm just going to do this to make it overly crazy. What would that be right there if green is accelerating, right? We're going this way down the track, right? And yellow is transition and red is braking. Is this making sense? This is what a driver who is transitioning to braking and taking an amazing amount of time. What is that? Probably like 8 braking markers, Mr. Rains, give or take, plus or minus.
Yeah.
That's what that would be. Big old bunch of yellow.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you see yellow, and actually, Eric, this is a good example because this was my first lap on slicks on new tires, and I probably wasn't accelerating all the way to the brake zone. See how it's yellow here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it's not green on the straightaway on this data channel, remember when you change the data channel, it's going to change the colors on the track. So pay close attention to that. But this is the first easy, Eric, when we say 3 easy things, the first easy one is going to be overlay long G on a track map. It's probably easier than anything else because it's going to intuitively make sense to us. Red's braking, green's accelerating, right? Nice and easy. What you really want to make sure you don't see is a choppy braking occurrence, meaning I see yellow, I see red, I see yellow, I see red, right? The seesaw effect, right? Brake off, maybe brake, come off the pedal to get a heel toe rev match and brake again, right? Those things are really apparent on this data channel.
Again, we're here to just kind of explain data, not make you a super data analyst. This is geared toward instructors that would like to know more about data, so they may or not help themselves and help their students.
Eric,
Use data with their students, but having data knowledge as an instructor makes you not only a better driver, makes you a better instructor. And we'll keep talking and show you how that works.
Absolutely. On the Q&A, Eric, do you want to get to those at the end?
Sure.
Cool.
John and Tim will be jumping on this in a second. Yep.
Yeah, and go ahead. If you guys have questions, make sure you hop in the Q&A box because that pops, notification up for us and makes it nice and easy to explain that. Eric, a couple other folks, maybe you're sitting at home right now and you actually have the Apex Pro app, which I definitely encourage you if you're on an Apple smartphone or have an iPad to download the Apex Pro app. Just search Apex Pro. And the main reason I say that is because you could follow along with us, and that's going to help illustrate some of these points. But some functionality in the app that's important to know is that if I tap on this driven line, I'm going to get a number that's going to represent the value of that data channel at that point on the lap. Right. So right here, Eric, where I see the black dot, that's telling me my longitudinal G-force. So I'm decelerating at negative 0.89 G. Right. That's a lot. That's hard deceleration. So we can tap this and we can see, and this can help explain what the coloring means, right? I'm decelerating a little bit harder here, right? Now, as I get to the turn-in point, my long G is going to start to decrease. I'm going to start to see less negative long G, right? Closer to 0. So you can tap and just see those values, right? This making sense, Eric?
So, yep. If you guys, if you're brand new to this, negative is I'm braking. Look what's happening with the numbers. They're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's less braking, less braking, less braking, less braking, less braking.
That's right. And Eric, something that I hear a lot from drivers is, I need to know my brake pressure. I need to have brake pressure logged. That's something that if you have looked into data or heard or thought about data, you've probably heard people talk about it. It's a very valuable data channel. But I'll tell you this, you can do probably 90% of what you do with longitudinal G with brake pressure. So don't get of the mindset that I need more. And the reason most devices in this entry-level price point don't have brake pressure is because it's not easy to record brake pressure.
You need an expensive sensor and some wiring, and it's almost as much as a data device to itself. What do you, as we move on to maybe some of the this quick 45-minute webinar, what else are you thinking here, my man?
I'm thinking, so this is obviously a very, very good first step. If you're looking at data, long G on the track map. The next thing I'm thinking, Eric, is probably the speed trace, which is what we call the money trace. which is a very, very important thing to be able to look at and understand. It's kind of like home base for driving in a lot of ways.
Matt
It's
Romanowski likes to say it's the result of everything. The
yeah,
result of everything
yeah,
you do with your hands and feet equals speed.
absolutely. Absolutely. And in a lot of ways, some of what we're looking at now too is some of that, right? But the speed channel is ultimately every change that we make in the car, every input change that we make will affect the speed trace, and we can measure it that way. And we can learn a lot about our technique from just that one graph. You want to take a look at that?
You bet, 100%. It's my babies. Love the speed trace.
So I'm going to tap the arrow right here on the side.
It's where you start. It's where you start.
Absolutely. Login coolant temp, sorry.
Little intimidating at first until you figure out what you're looking at. How do you present this to very, very first timers?
So the there's a lot of ways that have worked, a lot of ways that have not. I've been teaching this for a while, but the speed trace is if you go back to maybe, and I did terrible in math in high school, right? But if you go back to the X and Y coordinate, or X and Y axes, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you got your X axis, which is going to be along the bottom, it's horizontal, and your Y axis, which is like this. Right?
Y in the sky. That's how I always remember. Y in the sky. Y in the
like
sky
that.
Vertical. Y in the sky, and X goes east west.
I don't know why my one of my math teachers didn't just say that. I would have learned it. So what we want to look at anytime we're looking at any data is finding what is being measured on the graph is very important. So right here in the middle of the screen for Apex Pro, it's going to tell you. So Eric, I see distance right here, and I see speed right here. Following me?
Absolutely, you betcha.
So
with this
distance
guy, easier than you think once you know where what the axes are.
Yep. And the way you can test that, guys, if you're looking at yours right now, if you change this left one, if I move it to time and it changes the graph, you see how the horizontal axis changes, the x-axis changes. That's a good way to go, okay, which one is which? Oh, okay, if I shift it to time, that changes the horizontal axis, right? So I'm just swiping up. So this left data channel here, this left selector, is going to show us distance over the track, right? That's 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. In this case, I believe those are meters across the track.
And we're going to make this really simple and say at 1,000 meters on the track, right? 1,000 meters, the car is going 90 some odd miles an hour. That's how we're reading this, guys. It makes sense. At 2,000 meters on the track, Mr. Rains is going to help you with that in a second. Here we're going 83 and change or so. Take us home, baby. What
Sure.
you got for us?
I just saw
enlightening, baby.
I just saw a comment from Phil Antoine that said the DoD shift on the GPS offset can occur several times a day, and it absolutely does. So when we were talking about that previous map, you will see it move a little, and that's the GPS shift. And it's good to see you. Glad to have.
You want to jump into the Johnny Pops question here? If you have two cars running parallel down the track, will the GPS data consistently reflect that, or might one car be overlapped on the other due to the 6-foot error?
So these are two cars recording data in the same session parallel to one another?
That's what we think, right? So
yeah.
those little dots might be looking like they're on top of each other, but they're two independent ones.
If the GPS shift, like the DoD GPS shift, happens during that session, anything could happen. But if it doesn't, it probably would look like if you overlaid the two laps, you would probably see two parallel cars driving next to each other in the same session.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Another question that's relevant here, and I apologize, I think it's like a username, so I don't know your name, but the question is there a place where it mentions the units of each parameter for the graph? That's a great question. There is. So anytime you're using the Apex app and you have a question about what you're looking at, what's being displayed, this question mark in the top right corner is going to help you. So if I tap that, you can read through here. It's going to give an in-depth explanation of everything that you see. But if I just keep tapping next, eventually I'm going to get to this screen right here. And this is going to show me, Eric, every data channel that can be logged in Apex Pro, what the measurement is, what units are being used. So for speed, we can toggle between miles per hour or kilometers per hour. For long G, which we just talked about, um, that's telling us longitudinal acceleration, right? Forward G is positive, positive's forward G, right? And so distance is the one I believe we were just looking at. Distance is along the driven path, and it's yards or meters. So in this case, it's going to be yards because I'm using standard units, what we use here in America. If you switch to the metric system, then it's going to be meters, and you can do that in the user profile. Great question. So tap the question mark.
Speed trace, this one right here.
Yeah. So the speed trace, you can always identify it because it's fairly distinctive. It's going to look like peaks and valleys. Right? You're going to have high peaks, and they should be nice and sharp at the top, and then you're going to have some valleys that are kind of have a jagged V shape to them. So again, across the bottom, we have distance traveled across the track, and then on the y-axis, the vertical axis, we have speed in miles per hour. So I can look at 100 miles per hour right here, right? 0, 100, 120. So I can kind of get a sense for the values.
For first timers that look at this, and again, that's making the assumption that a lot of folks might be tuning in, instructors, first timers. I typically do this. I look at the tallest peak and go, where's the fastest part on the track? Then I go, oh, that's where I'm at. And then I do the inverse of that, going, where's the slowest part on the track? So this helps me understand where I'm at on the track. This part always on the left at 0 feet is the start line, and over here's the finish. As simple as this sounds, it's really important to know, because a lot of people have a challenge of figuring out where the heck they are and go, I don't know which corner I'm at. How do you know that you're already on corner 7 when you look over here in 12 and then all of a sudden I'm doing this and holy cow, Rama. So easy way to decipher that, right, is to go, where's the fastest spot on the track?
Yep.
Where's the slowest spot on the track? Where's the beginning? Where's the end? You can kind of almost piece, and this would obviously be a braking zone here.
So Eric, you're telling us the key is to relate the graph to track position. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's one of the things that I find that it's easier for people to understand. And we know that, I'll show you one other thing that's usually pretty easy for brand new folks. If this is the start and this is the finish, somewhere right in about here is the middle. So if you look on a track map, somewhere in this area, right, where there's a braking zone, is about halfway around the track. And here we are right here, halfway around the track. So this has to be the first half, and this has to be the second half. Just trying to figure out where you are is one of the keys to success when you're brand new, because you don't want to be overwhelmed. If you can't figure out where you're at, you put your fancy device away and you're like, screw this, I'm out. I'm just going back to driving. Well, stick with it, guys. It's easier than you think. What's some of the things you do, Mr. Rains?
Yeah. So if we're, obviously we're looking at this particular software, what I just did was I took this slider that's here in the middle right here. This guy, I can move it with my finger, and that's going to move these blue crosshairs that you see on the speed trace itself. And it's also going to move the little blue dot around the racetrack, the little small map.
Which is down in here.
Yep. So that allows me to move and display the values of the data at any point around the track, and also see where my track position is. So I want to see Vmax. I'll stop it at the peak. I can see where my Vmax is on the track right here where Eric is circled. See the little blue dot at the end of that straightaway that has kind of a bend in it. And then Eric, directly above where I stopped the data, actually right there where you see 114.22, right? That's my miles per hour, because that's what I'm looking at, speed. And the second number is the distance mark, the distance on the track, right? So now I'm seeing my speed, and that's 2,941 yards from the start finish line. And Eric, the reason we use yards in the Apex Pro world is because it's a smaller number than feet, and it's easier to package into the small screen, right? We're looking at stuff on a phone. We don't have a laptop in this case, right? If we use feet, then that number is a lot bigger. It's harder to compress it. So those are going to show us our values up there. Now, Eric, there's some things before we even talk about, we don't know exactly what speed our car can achieve in every corner, right? We can do a lot of math and try to figure it out, or we can, have a pro baseline the car, or we can just drive the wheels off of it and kind of get a sense for it. But really what we're looking for on the speed trace is going to reference our technique, and it's going to expose very easily if we have good technique or if we have poor technique. And as instructors, that's what we're looking for. We're not trying to tell our students, right, until we get to a certain point, we're not trying to tell our students, hey man, you could go a mile an hour faster in that corner, right? That's not our goal. Our goal is to say, your brake release needs to be improved here. Let's work on that, right? Or your way that you approach coming off the throttle and going to the brake, it takes way too long. It's not respecting the dynamics of the car. Right? These are things we can learn from the speed trace. And Kevin Colsheen commented and said, long G exposes coasting. So the previous page we were talking about. And he said, I should know firsthand. That's been something that Kevin's been working on. But he knows because of looking at the data, and he's been able to measure his improvement, which is really cool. So Eric, tell me about the shape. I'm gonna turn the screen so that we have a big speed trace. And tell me about what we should see in the shape of the speed trace.
Oh, you want to do some fun success stories?
Sure.
Pardon me, guys. So to help you understand data, I would look at this. Everybody, we know that this is when we're going fast, and this one's when we're going slow and we're going back to fast. I like to go into these right here. Let me clear this off so we can show that. So makes it make sense. And clear. It is not clearing. How about undo? There we go. Let's do this one. What are you doing that?
No, I think you went back. You undid too far. You undid.
Oh, okay. How about clear? Clear all. There we go. Thank you. I undid too far. We got this little hiccup, little funny guy right in here, and this little guy right in here, and this little guy right in here. Can we tell a story about what those are? Or anybody want to guess, first of all, what that is? Or put in the comments what you know it is. If you're brand new, you think about it. I'll give you a hint. There's a consistent theme here, and it looks like it's about 94 miles an hour across the board. By the way, if you can understand this, you're understanding data. Mr. Rains?
Yeah, so I'm looking at responses here, and we're getting a lot of good answers. Right on. Those are shift points.
Data experts. Woo!
Yeah, those are upshifts. So the big thing that we learned here is I can probably shift faster because those are pretty evident. And if you're looking at data, if you drive a car with a manual transmission, you're almost always going to see that little blip in the speed trace, and that's going to reference those upshifts.
Is this the same thing when we come down then? Is that what that was? Was that what that would mean? I don't know. If there's something going up, would they look like that coming down? I don't know.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, sure.
So you shouldn't see downshifts in the speed trace. If you do, then you're not doing something right with the brake pedal. So that's going to be releasing the brake, right? And remember, with the speed trace, we have to put our thinking cap on. And remember, we talked about that debrief at the beginning of the session. Remember, everything can affect the speed trace. So just think through this with me for a second, Eric. You circled one that was a corner that was at fairly high speed just a second ago. You circled an area of the speed trace that was at a fairly high speed. Just remember, guys, when we're looking at the speed trace, a lot of things can affect it. If you're driving a car at 120 miles per hour and you're flat to the floor on the throttle and all you do is turn the wheel, your speed does not increase at the same rate as if the wheel was straight, right? That steering input slows the car down. So sometimes we'll even see scrub from the tires slowing the speed down, right? And that's something that we have to kind of reconstruct in our brains. There's a lot of different things that can affect it. A really, really poor downshift, right? Where, the rear end kind of gets upset, right? And maybe the tires lock up, right? In that case, the speed trace would actually go from decelerating quickly, going down sharply, to flattening out a little bit. So all sorts of things can think through it. Just think in terms of speed, not in terms of, I braked, right? What affects speed?
So
That's
just
very
going back to this for new guys, one of the easiest things, right, is to figure out where your car shifts, you already know, and figure out where it is on the data. And again, here you can see it here. And several people got the right answers. Good for you. And you should feel good about that because you're spot on. Saw Matt was, I think, one of the first guys to jump in there. What else do you see in there, Mr. Rains?
Well, I see the troughs of the speed trace and the peaks of the speed trace kind of have a certain shape to them, right? They're either, in this case, most of them are pretty sharp and pretty aggressive at the top, right? Like that. And then I kind of see the bottoms that have this V shape to them. So Eric, the question begs then, what shapes are desirable on the speed trace? Right. That's what I'm thinking when I'm looking at this. Okay, cool. I see a jagged line that goes up and goes down, right? But what is good and what is not good?
So if you're brand new to this, and if you can see this, you are 90% ahead of the new people who are learning data. This is easier than you think. You want to talk about U versus V?
Sure. And Marlon got on there and said shark fin and sawtooth shapes. So what the sawtooth is referring to is the jagged top edge of the speed trace. So there's three shapes we'll
Right
touch on.
here. Yep.
And that's the sawtooth.
This
And
shape
then,
right here.
yep, a U and a V. So we're going to look for the sawtooth, which is on the top. And Eric, we call it a sawtooth because a sawtooth has jagged teeth that point up, right? Our speed trace should look like the teeth of the saw going across a saw blade, right? That shows that we have a good transition from wide open throttle to braking, right? We've all had that student who comes off the gas pedal well before they brake. That's going to look like a shallow. Give us an example of what that would look like, Eric. When I've got the student in the car, I'm in the right seat and they're coasting big time before the brake zone. It curves out the top of that speed trace, right?
Oh, we've seen that before. Can I draw a fake one in here?
Yeah.
So we're coming up like this and we're coming up and we do the shift right there, right? And they just kind of start puckering off right about there and not really decisive about their braking.
Yep.
Hey, with a few minutes to go, because we're going to keep this kind of short, what other low fruit items would you say to make it easy? If we were to go more than 3 easy learn data points for instructors, what would you offer?
Yeah, well, we didn't touch on the U and the V shape, which I think is probably going to be the next biggest low hanging fruit option. So when we say U,
into that shape right there.
yeah, your drawings take a second to pop up. So give me just a second. Yeah, we had another comment here that says, first point of performance is consistency. Hard to improve if it's different every time. So that's an excellent point. When we're looking at the speed trace, if you're looking at your own data, first of all, and you see a sawtooth in some corners and a sawtooth not in others, that's the first thing you need to work on is getting a consistent sawtooth.
Well, remember, folks, this is for data for new instructors, right? Instructors that are new to data. You got to know what you're looking at and understand it before you can start comparing it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for what this U and V is right now to say, hey, I know what this U and V is. And then exactly what Philip just offered is to start comparing it to other laps.
Absolutely.
You need this one first, and then to go compare.
So Eric, when we say U and V, we're talking about two very distinct things, and does the bottom of the speed trace, the trough, the lowest point in any given one of these troughs of the speed trace, does it look more like the letter U, meaning it's rounded, or does it look more like the letter V, meaning it's got a sharp bottom to it? So what are the distinguishing points between those? Why would we want a U? Why would we want a V?
Well,
the U is
yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Go ahead. You were jumping in there. Just
after you, I'm gonna back out of this in the interest of time. It's all yours.
Cool. Well, this might be the last thing that we cover. Then that's fine. I have plenty of follow up materials if we need to send out anything as well. So let's start with a V, because what you'll notice if you look at the data, the slower the car's going, the more V-shaped the corners are. right? So a V is going to usually represent a slow corner, and meaning if you're going through a fast corner,
down in the lower speed numbers.
right? If you're going through a fast corner and your speed trace has a V shape, there's opportunity, right? A V shape represents a dramatic change in speed, right? You go from decelerating quickly to accelerating quickly, which gives it that V shape, right? I'm threshold braking. I'm coming off the brake. I'm adding a lot of wheel. Now I'm back to power, big exit, got on all the throttle, right? That creates a V shape in the speed trace. That means if we have that in a slow corner, bingo, that looks good, right? If I see a U shape in a slow corner, meaning, Eric, I usually say 60 miles per hour or less is slow corner, right? But that can really be debated. But a slow corner, like where you see Eric that's drawing the V, if that was a U, I would go, whoa, there is opportunity there. What am I doing wrong? Conversely, a U is going to represent a high speed corner. In a fast corner, we want to be more delicate with the car's balance, right? We don't have to ask the car as much with our inputs in order to shift the weight at high speed, right? You usually have your students be really delicate with their hands. That's why we say smooth is fast, right? Smooth hands. Because at 100 miles an hour, quick hands is trouble, right? At 40 miles per hour, maybe not. A U shape is going to represent that I carried a lot of like high average speed. I carried a lot of speed through a fast corner, right? I had a really delicate brake release. I had really smooth hands. I went back to power. The biggest reason fast corners give us a U shape is naturally the tendency of the car at those speeds, right? It kind of slows progressively. We don't brake as hard approaching a fast corner most of the time. We trail out of the brakes sooner, meaning we get to power sooner, sometimes well before the apex in a fast corner. So if there's two things you take away from this, V represents slow corner, V slow, good, U fast, good. V slow, good, U fast, good. U fast? There you go, Eric. That's how you remember it.
Love that. Love that. Hey,
Cool.
what do you got happening? Great 45 minutes with you, amigo. What do you got happening this week, webinar wise, that we might want to know about?
Yeah, if you're, first of all, if you're not following us on Facebook or if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, reach out to me, Andrew at Apex Track Coach or Apex at Apex Track Coach, or just comment on Facebook. But we have a webinar designed for new Apex Pro users. So people that have recently bought an Apex Pro device or anybody who's interested in learning how to use the device. And that is a free webinar to sign up for. It is on Wednesday, February 24th. So this coming Wednesday, and it's at noon Central, Eric. I can drop a link in the chat box if anybody wants to sign up right now.
Go for it. That'd be super good. Guys, we hope this was helpful. Hope this was helpful for instructors. If you're still lost, if you're halfway there, send us a note. Be happy to help. There are a lot of beginner videos that will help you get there. It might take you a little bit of repetition. Usually it's most powerful when you're looking at data at your home track, and it's data that you have driven yourself. And there's something about it's magical where it's you're like, oh, I get it now. Fair statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure that you do yourself the favor. And I know we used Barber as an example, which would be my home track. It's 20 minutes that way, right? Use your home track for data. And certainly if you're interested in Apex Pro, reach out to me if you don't have one already, and I can send you some data. You don't have to own the device to be able to
got data from every track. Chances are we got data from your track, unless it's in the Northern Siberia HPDE Caribou run group.
Eric, I'm just commented in the chat box with a link to the new users webinar. So the Zoom link, you guys saw, it's this exact format. Just make sure that you register. You'll get reminded to join. It's at noon Central Time, so 1 Eastern on Wednesday, the 24th. And that's going to talk about, hey, I got my Apex Pro. Now what?
Yep. And by the way, Tim, to your answer, I've never seen a failure, a magnetic device failure. Rains, have you? No. Tim, you'd be good to go with one of these little Apex Pros.
What was the question?
I'll have to go back to that. I'm going to keep it right in here for you because there is another awesome webinar with John Santiago. Dude, he shared it with me earlier. I am so jacked. I was just laughing in virtual high-fiving with them, and that's in 11 minutes, and I have to get set up for that.
Cool.
So,
I'm gonna post one more thing, Eric, and
Yep.
that is a $59 webinar. And the reason it's $59 is because my buddy Robbie Foley, who races the Turner Motorsports
probably
BMW
the
and IMSA
hottest
full time,
commodity in IMSA right now. Yeah.
he's a big deal right now. Qualified on pole at the 24. We're going to talk about safe and strategic passing. We're going to cover racecraft, but it's also going to kind of have an HPD twist on it. So, what elements of IMSA racecraft can you kind of detune a little bit and incorporate in your track driving? And it makes a huge difference in what you'll end up seeing in your data if you get through traffic well. So definitely join us for that one. So there's 2 links in the chat box. One is the new users webinar. 2 is Robbie Foley passing webinar, because that's what we all do now, right, with coronavirus and in the winter. So I'll let you get to your next one, Eric, but thank you very much for joining. For those of you that I don't know, for those familiar faces, good to see you.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Stick around for the next one with a new link here in 10 minutes. Later, Rains.
See you.